Hi guys, and welcome back to day 25 of Inktober. So today is a day where I get to try a bunch of new products, which is super exciting because I love new art supplies. And actually some of the stuff that I'm using today that I'm deeming as new is stuff that I've already owned. Specifically, I will be using colored inks, but these colored inks are actually for fountain pens, and I've used them in fountain pens, which is really pleasant, and I love the colors and they're really beautiful, but I haven't really used them for drawing yet or any sort of painting, so I'm gonna count that as new. But the first thing that I am using that is actually totally new is this watercolor paper itself. And I definitely want to thank you guys. In that last video where I asked for suggestions for paper and stuff, I got a lot of good responses, which is exciting because I definitely plan on buying a few different kinds of paper beyond the one that I just bought today and I'm using, because I really want to be able to try out a few new ones and see which one is my favorite for this kind of tier of paper. But this one was suggested, and it was one that I could pick up in the store actually while I was grocery shopping, so that was really convenient. But this pad of watercolor paper was only $3.50, so it was super cheap, and it's this perfect size where everything's already cut into the size that I want to, so it just takes a step off where I don't have to break it down into a smaller size. So I was really excited about this little pad of watercolor paper. It was really perfect for what I wanted. It had a small amount of papers, which is good because I want to test it out before I get more or get a big notebook of it. So that's the first thing. The first negative that I have to say about this paper, and it's kind of a, in and of itself isn't so much negative because there's a way around it, but when I took the tape off of this paper, it reacted even worse than the Canson. And I've mentioned this where when I put tape on the Canson and I'm not thoroughly making sure that the tape is like de-sticked, or I'm sticking it to things like my pants or tabletops, making sure that it's not as sticky, if I don't do that, it just tears up that Canson paper and it leaves this horrible texture on it, and it rips the top layer off, and it's really sad. And I was kind of hoping, I was actually really hoping that this paper would stand up to that a lot better, because the tape is really integral to the way that I work with watercolors. I absolutely want that border on there, and I use the tape on top of that tape that I bordered down to secure it down, and it keeps it from warping as it dries. So that is absolutely necessary. But yeah, it actually tore a lot worse on this Strathmore paper than it did on the Canson paper. And this Canson paper, when I pulled it out, it felt a lot, I don't know really how to describe it, tactilely, it did not have that same like softness that the Canson paper did, so I was hoping that it wouldn't tear it like it did, but it did. And like I said, I can just take those steps to make sure that the tape itself is not as sticky and it won't really affect the paper as much. But this first painting that I did not do that, and it absolutely did take up that top layer of paper on the, but really that's only one small thing, and honestly maybe all the papers at this tier will kind of be affected by the tape, so I'm not too upset about that. But I am excited to test out how it actually works. It does seem though that this paper, it seems like it takes the water better. Like when I put the ink down or the ink wash, it feels like it adheres to the paper more, where like the Canson, it felt like it was like sliding around on top and not quite adhering to it. So I'm gonna have to do some tests to make sure that that actually is accurate and that's true, and not just the way that I feel, and that I'm looking for positives out of a new paper. So I'm not sure yet, but it did seem like it handled the water a little bit better than Canson. So I don't know. I'm excited to test these out actually, because I think it'll be a good reminder of what things I want out of my paper, why I want them, what techniques I want to practice on, because as I'm testing them out on these papers, I can see how it really does affect the pieces. But for the line work of this piece, I was really focusing on the hair, like usual. I love line working hair. There's just something so rhythmic about it, and I kind of have this like process of how I build it up and then how I fill it in, and it's just very therapeutic because I know already from muscle memory kind of how it shapes and how it forms and what areas I fill it in and what types of lines I fill it in with. So it's just really relaxing to be able to just fill in all this area with all this hair. But one thing that I wish that I had done a little bit better is, as I was sketching this out, I started getting a little bit on the hurried, kind of ready to move on phase. So I was a lot looser and sloppier with the line work, or with the sketch on the right side of the piece. So the areas where I am doing the hair, it kind of is less of a focal point. I like when I'm doing hair to have kind of a main area or a main like lock of hair, and then have other ones that are intertwining with it, branching off from it. But that's kind of the focal point of the hair, where that's the main area, and then there's other things that fill in the gap and all this other stuff. But yeah, I think that area I kind of should have given it a little bit more attention in the sketch level. But in the final line work, that's actually my favorite half, so I guess it kind of turned out okay. But it was something that I wish that I had put a little bit more focus on, a single chunk of hair. But yeah, and also when I'm doing line work with a brush, one of the things that I try to make sure of when I'm doing really fine details is that I try to save those to like the end of the ink that's on the brush. So what I mean by that is I'll dip it in, I will do a quick little test to make sure that the bristles are all smoothed out and it's doing the type of line that I want. So I'll dip it in the ink, quick little brush stroke, make sure that it's all set, and then I'll do a longer, more thicker brush or stroke. So like some of the hair lengths, I needed something really smooth and graceful and kind of thick. So I'd get that out of the way, and then I would have this really sharp point where that stroke pushed the bristles together, and I would have not a ton of ink on the brush itself, and I would take those and I would put in these really fine details. So that's usually where I go in and do this really like hairline thin lines that help define the shape of the hair. Those are ones that I save until the very end of a stroke and the very end of that ink that's in the brush. And that just really helps to make sure that I'm getting the most out of the process and that I'm not having to go dip back in as frequently, because I'm making sure that I'm using the lack of ink on the brush in an effective way. And now is my absolute favorite part. This is the fountain pen ink. And I have to say, this stuff is super saturated, especially compared to the watercolor. And that's what I absolutely love, is that these colors are like super crisp and pure. And I love watercolor, but that is my biggest kind of issue with it, is that I can never quite get it as sharp and saturated and pure of a color as I want it to be. And a lot of times I'll mix it up and I'll put it down and it looks great, and then it'll dry down and be a little bit more desaturated, and things just end up being a little bit more muted than I like. But this fountain pen ink, it stays super saturated throughout, and it's this really gorgeous color. I love how these look because they're really like gem toned, and I think they're really beautiful, and they are more water soluble. So I'm mixing in water with a lot of these so I can get the right value. So I actually might start getting more colors of fountain pen inks to use, because I was really happy with the results for this. And like layering them, it turned out pretty good too. I think it's just they look so great together. They mix really well together, and it was really nice. It was really nice. I'll say this. It's so nice to get back to color, because I loved working on black and white only for a long time. It was so relieving to not have to think about color. But once I did a piece like this, where it's all these like really gem toned, really bright colors, it just made me really remember why I love color and why I really kind of want to get back to it. So I'm glad that I could do a little bit of that and remind myself how much I love it. Actually, tomorrow I think I will definitely be using more of these inks, because that was just really satisfying to use this beautiful color in the piece. So I think though tomorrow I will do a piece that's more focused on a singular color with the values around it. So I'm excited about finding ways to incorporate this into Inktober and how I've been doing it. But yeah, overall I'm super happy with how these worked out. For the background, I did end up doing a little bit more of a lot more layers than I did with her and with her hair. For her, I tried to get it all in one stroke. So I started with making sure that the purpley area that I had actually mixed a very bright, like almost a ballpoint blue, like that really, really bright color that you can get in pens sometimes. I mixed that with the purple, and I got this really beautiful periwinkle color. And I focused that around her head, and then as I faded away, I blended more of the blue itself in. So I tried to get that all in one pass, where I wanted it to be really smooth, really, really blended gradient. But the background, since it had a little bit more layering to it, and I wanted it to look like there was more depth and kind of the smoke texture to it, I went in with it, and the first pass I put it a lot of different like mottled textures. I dropped in water to soften some areas. I dropped in more ink. I dropped in a little bit of the blue, but I mostly focused on the green itself. And I let that dry down. And then I did another layer on top where I did much, much darker. It was almost the pure green right out of the bottle, but not quite. I think I did add a little bit of water into that. And then I went over the little smokes coming out of the bottle so that they were a little bit more pigmented and dark. And then after that dried, I went over all of the background to just give it a little bit more of this homogenized is not the right word, a little bit more togetherness. Man, I'm totally blanking on the word that I want to use, but I just made sure that it came together a little bit more. It was more harmonious. That's what I was looking for. So that it still had those textures and those values underneath, but then it became something that was a little bit more of a shape to it. So that is everything for this piece. I absolutely loved using these inks. I think I'll absolutely have to use them tomorrow because they're really pretty, but I will have a link to all of the tools that I used, all of these inks. I'll have a link down in the description so you can check it out and maybe even use them, because I highly suggest you use some of these inks because they're so crisp. But yeah, like I said, that's it for today. The original's up at my shop. I know that this is kind of a broken record, but pretty much all of my Inktobers are going to be available. I like being able to get them out and do something with them. But yeah, she is available, so she will be up at my shop, and I'll have a link right in the very corner. Oh, if you do end up buying her, like I mentioned, the top layer around the border is a little bit textured up, which is unfortunate, but that's the way art goes sometimes. But yeah, anyways, that is pretty much it for today, and I will be back tomorrow for another Inktober, which I'm super excited about. So yeah, thank you so much for watching.